Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Last Honest Realtor. I am your host, David Fleming. Thanks so much for joining me today. I was going over some of the comments from last week's podcast, which was on the value of a buyer agent. And I expected some vitriol. I expected some nastiness. What I did not expect were 3 positive comments. That was maybe one of the things that's restored my faith in humanity. I don't know where I was going with that, but in all seriousness, I enjoyed that. My sister emailed me an article from the Globe and Mail that was about real estate fees and commissions. And then she emailed me some letters to the editor, as she usually does, about people saying, and topic for another day, and we'll touch on it now, saying that maybe MLS should become a public utility and that everyone should be able to post their listing on it. As I said, topic for another day. But I did talk in last week's podcast about the value of a buyer agent. So the timing of that Globe Mail article and the letters to the editor that my sister sent me were somewhat interesting because some of the things that people complain about, I touched on. So if you haven't listened to it, maybe go back a week, because this week we are going to talk about first-time buyers. And the market has just started. We are filming this on, I don't know what day it is, maybe because I have 2 children or because I am working in this crazy market. It's going to be busy. It's Wednesday. It's the day of the Bank of Canada interest rate announcement. They cut 25 basis points, as I'm sure you heard. Yesterday was Tuesday. Thank you, David, for explaining how a calendar works. Point being, it was the first day back in the busy fall market. You're listening to this presumably on Friday or later. You might have seen listings start to trickle in as we get underway in what I expect to be a very busy and very interesting and very confusing fall market. So there's a lot to talk about, and I wrote 2 blogs on this week alone, part 1 and part 2 of the burning questions in the fall market. We touched on inflation and interest rates, very unsexy topics. We talked about price, we talked about sales, we talked about inventory. One of the burning questions was, will we see affordability return? What does that even mean? There's a lot of things we talked about, but today specifically, I want to talk about first-time buyers. With me, of course, is my partner in crime. I don't even know what that means, but they say it a lot. With me is my valued colleague. Let me try again. With me is Tara Amina, who works on my team, along with Matthew and Chris and Jonathan and Lindsay, I should say our team, and who does a lot of work with first-time buyers. So I'm not going to pigeonhole you as the first-time buyer expert because you work with houses, condos, high-end, low-end, old people, young people, older people. What do they call them? People of advanced age? What's the politically correct term?
All the people.
So all the people. That's very inclusive. So I figured we'd chat. I'd pick your brain. I don't want to sound like I don't work with first-time buyers anymore. I would say that you and Matthew probably work with more buyers than I do because I'd say at this point 70% of my business is listings, and I have been in the business 20 years, so I've got a lot of folks that are moving up. I work with those folks. But let's talk about first-time buyers. And I don't know if you can hear the cat rolling outside the building. We're located at 103 Vanderhoof, where they're building a new road. And they're going to build, 20,000 new condo units, which is probably good because they built a subway there. Again, topic for another day. Tara, get right into it. What are first-time buyers thinking right now as we approach the fall market? What's the sentiment out there? What are conversations like that you're having?
Day 2, kids are back in school. Even for those that don't have kids, the mindset's changed. We're out of summer. We're out of fun. We're back to work.
You're out of fun? I'm going to a farm this weekend with the children, okay? You don't have kids.
I don't have kids, but it changes. August was like, let's go play beach volleyball, let's relax, let's go on a vacation, and now we're September, and we're
Our lives are so different, beach volleyball. I'd be afraid I'd hurt myself. Okay, so what are the buyers saying?
Well, with the Bank of Canada announcement this morning at 10 a.m., I already had 2 calls. This is the third cut in a row.
Yeah.
People feel like things are going to get better. The fall inventory is going to come in, and people are ready to go.
Yeah. So, the people that called, what do they say? Are they asking questions? Are they entering the market?
Yeah. A lot of them say they've been looking for the last 6 months, maybe a year. But with the third cut, they're kind of excited. They are getting sorted on their mortgage and their pre-approvals, and they want to start looking. And
so has the appetite changed from the summer, or let's say specifically coming into this year, January, what was that sentiment like with first-time buyers? What was it like in the spring? And has that appetite changed at all?
Yeah, I think in the winter, in January, in the spring, we're still really worried about what the Bank of Canada is going to do. Is it going to get worse? Is it going to get better? Mm-hmm. What's the market like? And I think now everyone's feeling a little bit more comfortable with where the rates are at. Mm-hmm. And a lot of buyers want to get ahead of everyone else and not miss out like they maybe did 2 years ago.
Interesting point. I've always said smart money buys ahead of the rate cuts. And I don't know what the opposite or inclusive or politically correct version is. The not so smart money buys after we've seen the rate cuts and prices have gone up.
Exactly.
So these conversations you're having with the first-time buyers, are these entry-level condos? Are these entry-level, the typical 3-bed, 2-bath, semi-detached for $1.2 million? Like, who's in the market right now?
Yeah, it's a mix. I think if you're a single person, you're probably looking at a condo with one income. But there's a lot of people that are jumping from renting with their partner straight into a home because they've got the 2 income. They don't want to buy a condo and then move out in 2 years.
And so are they all, I don't want to say interest rate sensitive, but the people that are on the sidelines and not coming into the market, do you think that's just about interest rates, or is that about something else?
Probably something else, and they just won't admit it, but interest rates is definitely
You're
what
smart.
we go with.
What is that? What is that? Like,
I don't know, there might be other things in their lives, but people will use the interest rates as a reason. And I think it is a factor, and it does affect, what your monthly costs are going to be, and it can be much more expensive. And when you look at your neighbor or your colleague that got that 1.9% rate or whatever 2 years ago, 3 years ago, people feel like they're slighted and they don't want to get in the market now.
But do you have the discussion with them? Like, let me throw some numbers out there. Okay, so I don't know, Dan and Jenny. God, that's so typecast. Dan and Jenny, they went and bought a condo. They paid $700,000. They got their 1.9% rate.
Yeah.
And then the market drops, and it goes up and it goes down, and it ping pong ball, back and forth. Let's say that they got that 1.9% rate at $700K, and let's say now you could get a 4.69% rate, but that same condo is available for $650. Do the first
maybe $600.
Don't tell Dan and Jenny that. No, I mean, look, I always say, if you're buying this to day trade, then yes, you need to be concerned about what it's worth. But in that case, those folks are buying for 5 to 7 years. Things do fluctuate. We came out of a period after an unprecedented pandemic where, of course, hyperappreciation led to massive increase in rates, and obviously the market adjusted. But in that situation, if you tell those same people $650,000, 3.99% 5-year fixed, and say a few months after riding variable, like, do the first-time buyers get that?
It seems like a no-brainer, but not everyone does, and they've got their parents and their friends and their colleagues and everyone else chiming in on what they should do and how they should do it and how they should plan the next 5-10 years of their life. So it's not easy. It's just not just my voice coming through.
So you mentioned parents. So one of the things we hear all the time is that people in Toronto get money from their parents. And in fact, if you go back a few years, there was that infamous billboard that said, "Can't afford a home? Get richer parents," which I don't really think helps society at all. Yeah. But we've seen a lot of articles about this. There have been studies on this. Can you tell me, without maybe naming names, you get first-time buyers, and whether they're 25 or whether they're 45, buying a house, buying a condo, what kind of level of stakeholders are we talking about here?
Yeah, I think the stat, I don't know exactly what it was, but I think around 30 to 50% of buyers in Toronto now get gifts from their parents, whether it's to help with closing costs, whether it's to help with a renovation, or just to have their name on title so that they can get, approved for more. Parents are involved in, I would say, almost half the transactions.
Half. And so co-signing. So one thing is a parent giving you $200,000. Okay, go buy a condo for $600,000. Here's a 33% down payment. But you're seeing people that maybe don't have the income, and you're saying a parent might act as a guarantor or a co-signer on a mortgage.
Yeah, or all of the above.
All of the above. Interesting. Yeah, we should chat with Tony about that. Tony's our mortgage broker. I'm sure he could shed some light on that. So in terms of the interest rates, you had mentioned that maybe they're not all so price sensitive, but do you find that people are trying to get out ahead of it? I know we're very early. We're like 3 days in, but I'm predicting probably October 26th, we see another rate cut. I don't know if we see one in December, but it seems to me that if somebody were to buy now, sit on a variable, pay a lot for now, could be a pretty good decision come next year.
Yeah, I think a lot of the people that are ready to jump in this week, I've had people that are waiting on the sidelines since July, August. There's nothing out there, and they're ready to go. They're approved, they've got their deposit in hand, they've got everything sorted, and they're just waiting for the right house to come on the market.
And we'll see that obviously as inventory ramps up. I think one of the things I'd written on my blog this week is that we saw the fewest sales ever. I always say ever. I started charting the data from 2002 because that's when TREB changed. But we saw the fewest sales since 2002, and it's not like inventory has plummeted either. So when we talk about, I'm going to sort of make this a question and a statement. You said the right properties. People talk about all this inventory that's out there. In the condo market, I refer to how there's a quality issue. The quantity is out there, but there's just a lot of junk, right?
And a lot of stuff that's been sitting for like 80 plus days.
And assignments and new builds and flips and stuff that's at
tenanted properties.
Right. Oh, that's something we should come back to, of course. So you mentioned sidelines. Okay. Every time a reporter calls, they say, do you have anyone that's waiting on the sidelines for interest rates to decline before they jump back in? I know I'm making a lot of the rate discussion, but like, do you have any clients that are like, once rates hit X, I'll jump in, or anybody that's got a target, or are your people just kind of feeling it out as they go?
I think they might have that in their head, but they might not say it to me. They might not admit it because, like you said, when you do actually plan it out, and if you are waiting for that cut, you know that hundreds of other people are also waiting, and you're going to be in competition again, and no one wants that.
Yeah, and Tara said competition. It's funny, or not so funny for you or the client, but she did an offer last week in a place in Ossington that had
19 offers.
It was 13.
And you said the condo market was not hot.
Well, apparently not on Ossington, but I thought it was 13. How did it get to 19?
Because everyone registers 30 minutes after they're supposed to.
And if I recall, there were like 0 offers like an hour before.
Till like 5 p.m., yeah. And then by 7 we had...
That must be tougher for a first-time buyer than someone through it a few times.
When everything else we've seen was sitting on the market for 90 plus days, yeah.
Wow. Okay, so switch gears here. Let's talk about the process. So when somebody wants to buy their first house or condo, they email you, they phone you, they TikTok you?
No, not me.
I'm going to make fun of myself here. No, seriously. I mean, what's the process like? We all have our individual processes, but what's the conversation like? How do you get people started?
A lot of people come to me saying, hey, I've got this list of 5 properties already. I want to see. I've been looking for a year. I'm ready to go. But I always take a step back and let's go from the beginning. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about everything that's going to happen throughout this process. Let's look at every piece of paperwork. Let's figure out what you actually need to get ready to buy, because it's not just about going out and looking at properties. There's so much that they don't know they need to know.
Mm-hmm. Well, I use the example of if you were to write an exam, and all you had seen is the outside of multiple textbooks, and you've been browsing, you've seen the books, you never opened them, you never studied it, and God forbid actually done the application. I think a lot of the first-time buyers now, they have so many websites with so many photos, and they just browse and they flag and they bookmark, and then they come to you, and do they ever realize like they don't actually know anything?
I think eventually, yeah, but that's what I'm here for. That's my job.
So what are the things that you have to do at the very, very onset? You have that conversation and someone says, I want to go out and look tomorrow. And you say, hold the phone. Here's what we need to do first.
We need to sit down together. We need to actually talk about what you want, what you need, and what's possible.
In person?
In person.
I like
right
that.
Here at this table.
So it's not over text message?
No.
I find a lot of young agents today, I'm really typecasting again. For the record, I'm 44 and I got into the business at 24. But yeah, we used to go meet. We'd meet for coffee. We'd meet at the office. That was what professionals did. One of the problems I see now is that everything is over text message, and there's so much you need to discuss. I used to like to get people into the office. I'd hook the laptop up to the big TV. We'd go through. We'd look at listings. We could show statistics. I feel like a lot of the first-time buyers today, they think it's easy. They just want to jump right in. Let's get in the car and go start looking. What are the problems? What are the pitfalls with that?
Well, I think sometimes they have an idea of what a unit's going to be like, what living in that building is going to feel like just based on the pictures and how nice it is and how the finishes are, and their friend lives there, but there's so much more to consider. If you've lived in one neighborhood in the city your whole life, you don't know about all the other neighborhoods. And even if you say you want to be in the West End and you haven't considered the East End, like I'd like to take you on a tour in the East End and show you what I like, and take you up north and down south and wherever we need to go. But
up north to Muskoka, down south to Florida.
Sure.
That's where my mind went. Okay.
But it's not always, you're not always going to end up where you think. And it's my job to make sure that we've explored all the options. And
so you challenge people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if somebody says, I only want to live in Liberty Village, what are you going to tell them?
Great. Why?
Okay. I feel like now I'm going to be Becky, the 24-year-old. It's just like, I really like, my friend lives there. Her name is Tina. Why are you looking at me like that? No, seriously. Like, so Becky wants to live in Liberty Village because Tina lives there. What do you tell her?
Well, I think it depends. If her life is there, if she works there, if her, if she wants to be in Liberty Village, there are some great buildings in Liberty Village.
Yeah, no doubt. But you open her eyes to other locations. I mean, I used to tell people, I lived in King East. People would say they want to live in King West. Why do you want to live in King West? Well, that's where the action is. And I'd say, but you can get a cab and you can go there and then you can come home. Like, you don't have to live right next to where you work. So you don't really have to live right next to the restaurant you like or your buddy that happens to have a place. So, I mean, I always found when I was working with first-time buyers, I like to challenge them a little bit. And I found, like you said, you don't always end up where you thought you would.
You never end up where you think you will.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so give me an example. Give me a proverbial Becky. Younger people are going to hate me, but fine. So, take a Becky that you've worked with and they wanted to live in a certain building or area. What did the process look like? Where did you go? Where did they end up? I'm trying to think of somebody.
Yeah, someone not named Becky. She wanted something brand new, 1-year-old building. We don't know much about it yet.
I hate 1-year-old buildings, but go on.
She had to look at units that were under 500 square feet because it was $1,400 a foot. The kitchen is half a kitchen, but she loves to cook, so that was a problem.
Right.
We went out and looked at a 10-year-old building down the street that had much more space. She could renovate the kitchen, build her dream kitchen, and have the space and be in a good building that's well established and is run well and live in a similar kind of neighborhood.
And did it take her a while to come around to that?
I mean, when you see those properties back to back, it's pretty easy to see what you're getting for what you're spending.
And so then you look at, like, I'm a stats guy. So Becky, okay, so Becky says to you...
I don't know any Beckys.
I don't either. Maybe that's why I'm using the name. I don't know. What's a kid named today? Willow, the 24-year-old, social media influenced blogger?
River.
Okay, so River and Willow. No. One of River, Willow, or Becky emails you a listing and says, OMG, Tara, I absolutely love this. And then you look it up and you see that it's priced at $1,500 a foot. It's just finished registration. You probably think it's 90% rentals because it's an overwhelmingly investor sold building. And then, oh my God, the maintenance fees are 94 cents a square foot. Can you get in their head and their proverbial kitchen or otherwise? How do you get past the photos? How do you get past the idea that they see this beautiful kitchen or this beautiful floor to ceiling window and explain to them that from a value perspective, this doesn't make sense. The building down this block's better. Let's look at something different. How do you sort of break that barrier?
Well, I think what you said about, 94 cents a foot already for maintenance fees, and that's in the first year.
Yeah.
And they usually double in the first 2 years. Maybe not double, but they increase because we don't know how to run a building yet.
For sure.
So I think that's one thing people forget is you're not only buying the unit, you're buying into the building, and that matters so much.
Yeah. And I again, like going back to years ago when maintenance fees were, say, averaging 70 cents a square foot, I would tell people, if you were to buy in a building that's 90 cents a square foot, you might pay a little bit less on the square footage side. But I don't see that now. I actually see in newer buildings where it's a year old, the fees are higher. I don't know why.
And nothing's included.
Right. And then if there are amenities, a lot of times they're not done in newer buildings because unfortunately that's just how some of these new projects are built. And I guess, again, I'm going to typecast, and maybe you can go into some of the socialization aspects of this, but I find that in the base of a lot of really beautiful new buildings, there's a cool restaurant, a cool coffee bar. I would think the intelligent side would be like, great, I don't have to live in that building. I can go and frequent this establishment. But the few first-time buyers that I've worked with in that space, they want to be right in there.
Well, I think it's hard, too, when you're just looking at photos on your phone. Some of those older buildings or, units are tenanted, or if they're not staged properly, they don't look good, but I know it's going to look beautiful once we get all that stuff out and they paint it and they put their own furniture in it. So that's my job, is to pull those listings that they would never look twice at. But I know it's a good layout, it's a good building, it's a good price, and we can transform it with.
So there's a little deprogramming. I don't think that's changed since, I used to, when I started, I had a lot of bankers, and the objection there, first time buyers, everything for them was, how will this appreciate? And so they would look at me and they'd go, okay, how would this appreciate versus this one? And I would say to them, if I can put you in a building that appreciates 12% in the next 3 years versus this building that appreciates 8% in the next 3 years, which are you going to pick? They look at me like I'm crazy. Obviously, the one that's going to out-appreciate. And I'd say, where are they? What's the unit look like? Does one have a big outdoor space? Is one in a better area? Not everything comes down to dollars and cents. Now, that was that banker crowd. I had a lot of first-time buyers in this one group, and that was always the conversation. But trying to explain to people, and you've been there, you guys live in a condo, you've lived in 3 or 4 over the last few years, not to give your whole life away, but you have the experience, and you can speak from your own trials and tribulations living downtown. And I find that sometimes there's a bit of deprogramming, maybe at the onset. And I will toot my horn and yours. I think that's what we do really well, is we challenge people and we tell them what, maybe not what they should do, but other things they could consider.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people living in Toronto now, buying a first home, everyone sees themselves as an investor because this is your biggest investment. But really, we're buying a home and we need to live in it for the next 5+ years, hopefully.
Yeah.
And I think thinking of that first versus how much money am I going to make in 5-10 years?
I speak my own experiences. My first condo I lived in for 4 years. My second condo I lived in for, it was 5 years and 7 years, or 5 years and 8 years. But as I've told in other podcasts, even though I knew I could go buy a house and I could do better and make more, and all my friends had bought houses, I decided to stay in the condo longer because it made sense for the lifestyle. So when you're talking to first-time buyers, and I always say we wear a lot of hats. We could be, the marriage counselor. We have a difficult, couple of clients, and I had a serious domestic on the phone the other day with a couple of clients who were arguing about price. We wear a lot of hats. How do you convey to first-time buyers moving to downtown Toronto, let's say, in the condo market, how they should be living their lives, doing social things, whether it's transit, whether it's weekends and groceries, and where does that come into play in the context of the housing surge?
Well, I think from the first meeting in person, I learned so much just being in the same room with someone and figuring out what they actually need and want and for the next 5 years and not what their parents want for them. I can speak from experience. When I was looking at my first place, my dad wanted me to buy a rundown bungalow that we could renovate and, add value. And it all sounds great in theory, but my lifestyle, my husband's lifestyle is not sitting at home and being general contractors and managing a bunch of people, right? That's not what my life was going to be. And we bought a condo and we're so happy for it. But people want a certain thing because their family and their friends and their partners envision something that maybe they wanted to do. And I think getting to know them and figure out what they actually need for their lives is a big part of it.
Okay, so what does a first-time buyer need to do? They call you, you say, great, let's get started. What's the to-do list immediately? What are the things that maybe they don't need to do right away, but they should be on the lookout for on, let's say, the horizon?
I think that's really personal to each buyer, where they're at, who's involved. Is it the parents? Is there a partner? Have they got their pre-approval set? What's their financing look like? What are we planning for? Where are we moving? What is this? There's so much to consider.
So you mentioned the pre-approval. So we work with a mortgage broker. When you speak to somebody and you say, do you have a mortgage pre-approval? I assume that's part of the call.
Yeah.
If they say, oh no, I haven't done anything on that yet, what's your answer?
A lot of the time. That's the first thing you should do.
Okay. And then somebody says, I'll do that when I need to. I've played online with some mortgage calculators. Let's just go out and start looking. What's the advice on that?
If we start looking before you know what you can afford, then we're probably going to fall in love with something that you can't buy.
Interesting. That has not changed since I used to do that. And that's what I'd always say. I'd say, you can't get into the front seat of my car. Shows you how long ago this was, because we used to drive people around.
I still do.
Can't get in the front seat of my car until you have the mortgage pre-approval. And it's not because I'm being a jerk. It's because, to Tara's point, I cannot tell you how many times people would say, I have an idea of what I can afford. I'll do it later. And then unfortunately, they can't.
Yeah.
So guys, we're going to take a very quick break. More with Tara Amina and myself when we come back. Welcome back to the podcast. And before the break, we were talking about interest rates, which I think is kind of boring now. It's kind of played out. We're going to talk about interest rates for the rest of the year. I want to talk about locations. We're talking about first-time buyers. Where are they going? Now, Tara, I am older than maybe I used to be. I'm not working with as many first-time buyers, and downtown has basically doubled in size since I started in 2004. What are the neighborhoods and what are the areas right now that you find yourself working in the most?
Yeah, location's a fun one. It's one of the most important because we can never change it. Liberty Village, King West, Queen West have always been popular.
Those are the areas from back in my day. I said back in my day.
Yeah, I think they're still quite popular. There's a ton more condos going up. There's way more infrastructure. Liberty Village has gyms, multiple gyms now, multiple grocery stores, banks, and everything you could really need. But it is congested, and if you need to leave that little pocket of the city every day, it's maybe not the place for you. Or if you can afford to leave that neighborhood and maybe go a little bit north, maybe go up to, Little Italy or High Park's hot right now. The Junction, if we want to go to the east side. I love Leslieville. I'm a little bit biased.
I have an east side bias. Someone wrote that on my blog today, of course. I was always in the St. Lawrence Market. That was my jam.
Yeah, not as far east. We love the St. Lawrence Market. Going down to the waterfront. Some people want to be down there. They bike a lot. They want to commute easily, get to Union Station, get in and out of the city. Whatever it is, everyone's got their pocket and their reason for being there.
And so I guess in terms of trade-offs, one of the things that I used to tell people was you're usually more interested in your area neighborhood or your specific unit. So let's use an example. Sally, because I don't want to go back to Becky. Sally lives in King West. It's amazing. There's nightclubs, there's restaurants. Actually, the nightclubs from back in my day are all condos now. But that's where the action is. But she's got a 500 square foot unit. It's not very big, and it's kind of boring. Or let's say Sally's King East. She's St. Lawrence Market. There's not as much around there. It's a little bit more quaint. But for the same price, let's say she's got 600 square feet and a balcony. Do you find that your first-time buyers are playing that game? Are they looking at one versus the other when it comes to location and working with those kind of trade-offs?
I think they do want more space now,
Yeah.
just because a lot of them work from home. They need a little desk. They need a little space to work from home.
Okay.
They might not need to go into the office every day. So being close to work isn't as important, I find, as it was 5 years ago. Because now you only need to go into the office maybe once or twice a week. So having that work from home space, having a space that's separate, not having it in your bedroom is really important. So I think getting a little bit extra square footage and maybe being walking distance from your gym is more important than being right on top of your gym or right on top of your favorite bar or restaurant.
And walkability is important, obviously. I think when I got into the business, again, most one-bedroom condos came with a parking space. So naturally, everyone had a car, right? People would be like, oh, I was born and raised in Markham, and I went to school at Queens, and, I've got my car from school, and I bought a condo with parking. So, yep, and then they leave it there. Probably 26 out of 30 days. They take it out on Sundays to go grocery shopping or to visit their parents. So do you find people now are learning to do more with less in terms of square footage, kitchen size, say, the presence of a storage locker, parking, and just kind of how the shift has happened and everything's become smaller over the last few years?
Yeah, I think the storage locker is almost more important than the parking spot. Most people are giving up their cars. If you don't need it for work, you don't want to deal with the congestion in the city. If you're going away for the weekend, you rent a car.
Yeah.
You want to get your groceries, you deliver them. You order them to your house. You don't need a car for your everyday anymore. And like you said, most condo buildings have less parking spots. Visitor parking is gone in most buildings.
True.
So
Yeah.
I think the locker is almost more important.
Well, one of the things you mentioned, I had a question saved for later on. I was going to talk about how things have changed. And Amazon Prime wasn't really a thing when I was living in condos. And now you walk into a condo and it's like, I remember going to 112 George, right? That was where I used to live. And I went back there after the pandemic. And the same concierge was there, and I looked at him, and he just had this look. He was sitting in between like two 50-foot-high stacks of packages. And so, we did a podcast on pros and cons of houses versus condos. We've talked about trade-offs before. I think for younger people now, you mentioned ordering groceries, right? So obviously, that means they don't need a car, but maybe it means they pay a little bit more. Or you're ordering things through Amazon Prime, whereas you used to go out and shop for them. So in my whole search for, are they doing more with less, it sounds like you're saying they're figuring it out.
Yeah, just doing it differently.
And they don't have a choice because developers are making condos smaller and smaller.
Smaller and smaller, yeah.
So then that leads into my next question about the kind of buildings that we're looking at. What are people into right now? Talk to me about some of the buildings maybe you were steering them away from, maybe not specific buildings, but what is it when someone says, hey, Tara, these are the units that I like, and there's 5 of them. When you say these 2 right here, I don't think we need to look at, what are typically those reasons?
There can be so many reasons. Maybe one of the buildings is an Airbnb building, and 90% of the units are short-term leases, and it can get pretty wild.
Okay.
So there's a handful of buildings in the city that I would avoid. Maybe one of those units is tenanted, and they're not on a month-to-month. They're in a 1-year lease.
Right.
So we can't actually ask them to leave for another 8
very
months.
Good point. Yes.
So sometimes those are it seems too good to be true.
Okay. And probably pricing, I would assume, like price per square foot, we've kind of touched on.
Price per square foot,
Yeah.
maintenance fees might be high.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a lawsuit in the building. We go into almost every building every year, and we kind of know what the situation is. How does the status certificate look? Is it clean? Are there a lot of red flags? So some of my clients might think I'm picky, but I just want to avoid, again, falling in love with a unit that might not make sense.
No, and I don't think picky's the word. I think that,
Selective.
I remember once I had a client that emailed me like 8 places, and, I crapped on like 6 of them. And he was like, David, I really appreciate a little bit more positivity. And I thought, I'm doing my job, right? The units that you are picking in these buildings, in these locations, there are reasons why. If you want a salesperson, there are many in the industry. But what I pride myself on, and what I think you and Matt emulate with a lot of these first-time buyers, especially in the condo market, is, and I'll kind of segue here, a friend of mine from university reached out, 15 years after university, and he was like, hey, I'm moving to downtown. I have no idea what the hell to look for and where to start. There's just too much out there. And I find that there is so much out there that these first-time buyers, they just look at pictures. They look at pictures and they say, I really like this. By this, they mean the staging. By this, they mean the photography. By this, they mean the kitchen. They haven't been in the building. They haven't walked the street. They don't know who built it or how old it is or what the fees are or what the amenities are. They don't know where the transit is. These are the kind of things that we teach them. And, I pride myself on that. I know you and Matthew do too. So what's changed today for first-time buyers, let's say, compared to 15, 20 years ago, maybe when I was buying my first place?
Yeah, well, everyone has a different list of wants and needs, but I think people are steering away from the inset bedrooms that a lot of builders.
That was big back in the day when soft lofts were a fad.
Yeah, the sliding doors, you don't have a window. Some people love it because they want their bedrooms to be dark and not have a window, but a lot of people don't. The wall kitchens, tiny little kitchen.
Appliance wall, yeah.
Yeah, no island.
Or the
People want an island.
The lichen, we call it. Somebody quoted me in the Toronto Star the other day. I said a lichen, and she said, "What's a lichen?" Combined living kitchen.
Yeah.
So small spaces, you're saying?
Yeah, small spaces. People want to entertain. They want to have space for a dining table, for their desk, for their pets. Almost everyone's got a dog now.
Okay.
There's a handful of buildings in the city that don't actually allow pets.
Older buildings, yes.
Yes. But pandemic, everyone's got a puppy, so they need space for it.
And so I guess maybe the home office thing you touched on, that to me would probably be, if I had to guess, I bought my first condo in 2005, and it was a time when, I'm going to admit this in this podcast, I actually did not know that I could get my work email on my home computer because I thought I had to plug it in at work. This is 2005, and Jonathan's laughing off camera, but I'm serious. It was a very different time, and I didn't really do a lot of work at home in 2005, but now everybody is working from home. So is that what's important? Would you say that being able to work from home, no, seriously, that's a true story. And the first time I put my laptop on and it downloaded, it was a game changer. But seriously though, everyone's working from home these days. Is that something that you think has moved way up the list, say from 2018, 2019?
Absolutely.
And cars you mentioned, we're not seeing as many people that need a parking space.
Yeah, or I think everyone thought I need to buy a condo with a parking spot, whether I have a car or not, just for the future, for appreciation, for resale. But I don't think that's the case anymore.
So you mentioned amenities. Does anyone care about amenities anymore in 2024?
1 out of 10, maybe.
Really?
They think they care, and then they move in, and then they move to their next place, and they're like, oh, I never used that pool that I had for 8 years.
Or like the sad hot tub. I remember at 230 King when I lived there for years, and it was like, why would anyone go in there?
It's always out of service.
Yes, it is, because who's servicing the hot tub? And then it's like, what's the pH level in there? Who was in there last? I really don't want to know. You should have like a picture of whoever was in here last, and you can decide whether you want to go in or not. There's never anyone in there. I never went upstairs, and it's like, oh, hey, Biff from 308, he's just hanging alone in the hot tub. Why don't I get in? Seriously.
Not the hot tub, but barbecues, rooftop terrace, people
Jinx.
love.
Yes. Okay, rooftop terrace, I'll give you. I never used the gym in my first condo. My second condo, again, probably because I was older and busier, I would run 5Ks on the treadmill, but I think that was about it. And I remember having discussions with people, the proverbial parties. No, I actually was young enough to go to real parties. But I remember arguing with people about, like, they lived in City Place. And I'm like, my building's great. It's got a bowling alley. And I'm like, how often do you bowl? Do people actually care about this stuff when they're buying? Like, my assumption is every first-time buyer is so busy trying to pay their mortgage, they don't have time to bowl.
Yes, you're right. No one cares.
True story. I remember exactly where I was. Navy Wharf. I'll save you that story. Tara knows once I get started telling stories, she cannot shut me up. Okay, seriously though, let's talk about the fall market. Let me give you a scenario where you have the first-time buyer. So I want to ask shortly about what we're going to do in the fall market when it comes to competition. But let's take a quick break right here. We'll come back for that fun bit in a minute. Welcome back. There's maybe a couple more things I want to cover before we part for the day. I think most important of which is, how are you, with your first-time buyers, going to navigate the fall market where you have all these different listing strategies? And you mentioned that place in Ossington that had 19 offers. Our clients are all reading the same media. The condo market's awful. The housing market's on its knees. They've got their parents. They've got their friend from work. There's all the negativity. There are undoubtedly going to be some properties with a lot of interest. You have a client. They're interested in one of these properties. How are you going to handle that?
I think they have to be ready for every single scenario that's going to happen this fall. There's going to be a bit of everything. There's going to be the list low, hold back for offers. There are going to be 19 offers on a property again. There's going to be the list high, offers anytime. And as long as we're ready and prepared for every scenario, we can be successful in this market.
And so it's tough because, again, context is important. If you have someone with a $500,000 budget, they send you 6 properties, they'll sit $499. But one of those properties is actually worth $650. And they've done a list low, hold back offer strategy. Is this something that at the onset you're going to discuss with buyers? Do you think it's important enough that they need to get ahead of this from a knowledge standpoint?
Absolutely. I think that's easy enough to look back and see the comps and say, okay, yeah, this is worth $650 and it's not a $499.
Yeah. And from a negotiation standpoint, I think I always highlight days on market, and a lot of our clients are used to just looking at what is brand new coming out. For the people that are out there and they want a deal, and again, I go back to the example I used of, I had this banker crew back in the day. All they would care about is how much it's going to appreciate and what's the sale to list ratio. If you want to look at stuff that's been on the market 30 plus days, then do only that. But if you want to look at brand new stuff, it's very hard to combine the two of those, right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of that. There's a lot of things that have been sitting for 30 days. You've got a few properties yourself.
Who, me? What, this old thing? Yes, cat's out of the bag. No, I've explained this in podcasts. I bought 2 condos this year. Tara was telling me off camera, the unit that I just bought for $460, someone put it up for $538, a similar unit in the building. And I was like patting myself on the back, and Tara goes, "Oh, come on, Dave. It's not like they're going to sell for that. Let me have my moment."
They might.
No, they won't. It's ridiculously overpriced. The point is, I think that underscores exactly what I'm talking about. And so look, the unit I bought, let's say it's worth $460 because it's worth what someone's willing to pay. They were listed at $499. Nobody bought it for $499. How does this other person with the same unit then price at $538? That's what we're up against this fall, is there's this really odd dichotomy, or let's just say like it's a willful ignorance. There are a lot of sellers out there that just don't care. They're randomly picking a price and comps be damned.
Yeah.
So again, let's say in that situation, $538, I paid $460 for mine. You have a buyer that says, "Hey Tara, can we get this for $460? What do you tell them?
It's probably got to sit.
Okay, yeah, totally fair. That's what I would have said.
And if we sit for 30 days and we still like the property, then we can turn back around and maybe there's a deal to be had.
And maybe they've moved on to something else. The newer, sexier, shinier thing, right?
Usually happens.
I mean, I think it's tough for first-time buyers to understand that and to have that kind of ration and logic that we develop over time. We could say, these people are crazy, they've overpriced it. We've seen properties sit on the market for a year. I think a first-time buyer is like, "Hey, I don't understand, Tara. It's an apple and it's an apple. Why are they priced so differently?" And then ultimately, you've got to guide them through that kind of patience process to maybe wait and see what happens.
Yeah, which can be a lot of fun.
Well, I think the fall market's going to be a lot of fun, and I had fun today. I hope you did, Tara. She's so excited to leave.
So
I
much.
can't even tell you. Folks, thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions on being a first-time buyer, feel free to email myself, email Tara. If you have any ideas for future segments, please let us know, because I really want to discuss this fall, not just the things that I want to talk about, but the things that are on other people's minds. And it can't always be about interest rates. So folks, if you are on YouTube, feel free to drop us a comment, negative or positive. If you are listening on Apple Music or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And we'll see you here next time on The Last Honest Realtor.